So welcome to the u-nite service. It's Unity Temple's weekly interspiritual service. Again, my name is Macha, Greenleaf-Maple, and I'm thrilled to be with you today to share this time. So the purpose of this service is to allow us to come together and consider interspiritual ideas on our growth path. Unity is founded traditionally and culturally on the teachings of Jesus, teachings such as love, forgiveness, oneness, versus the teachings about Jesus, stories of his life and other worthy things. But we come together for this service bringing ideas from all different sorts of traditions. And so you'll hear some of that today. This is the second week of a series based on the New York Times bestseller book, The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And as Nian started us out last week, I'm excited to share with you the next portion of the book today. Thank you everyone for coming today, and I hope that you were able to hear the meaning of Valerie's song. You each are a masterpiece, a work of heart. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is how we bring our hearts into these human journeys and how we create masterpieces in our lives and as community together. So this is the book that we're working with, Michael Singer's Untethered Soul. The talks that you'll be hearing across these 6 weeks are inspired by this book. This is something that my husband John and I read several years ago and started putting into practice. And as Nian mentioned last week, every time you visit these ideas, you just get at it a little bit deeper and can weave the practices into your life a little more fully. What I'm hoping to bring you from this talk today is an understanding of our nature as energetic beings, an ability to feel what openness and what closing feel like, an understanding of why we would go to the trouble to stay open, and techniques and supports along the journey for us in that. So last week in the opening to this talk series, Rev Nian helped us to consider the nature of our beings and our relationship to the voices in our heads. She asked us to move beyond our conceptualizations of ourselves as personalities and egos to an understanding of what lies beneath and beyond all of that. We are consciousness itself, witnessing the unfolding of our experiences. And from our unconscious egos, we narrate our lives with what we like and what we don't like, how things should be and how they should not be. And we tend to move along through our days buffered and buffeted by circumstances and our reactions to them. Yet we actually have a great deal of freedom in these human journeys. We can free ourselves into a consistently positive, peaceful, vitally alive state. And we do this by being awake to our energetic selves, centered in our conscious awareness, moment by moment. According to the best estimates of science, it's taken our universe about 13.8 billion years to get to this moment. And within that time, physicists assure us that the total amount of energy in the universe has remained the same. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. It simply changes form. Those of us currently experiencing human lifetimes are rather spectacular manifestations of this energy and have the freedom to consider ourselves as energetic beings, both physically and spiritually or metaphysically. Michael Singer says, you have a wellspring of beautiful energy inside of you. When you're open, you feel it. When you're closed, you don't. This field of energy comes from the depth of your being. It has been called by many names. In ancient Chinese medicine, it's called qi. In yoga, it is called shakti. In the West, it's called spirit. Call it anything you want, he says. All the spiritual traditions talk about your spiritual energy. They just give it different names. You may be familiar with the concept of chakras, energy systems, or meridians, of auras, just another energy. And then in scientific circles now they're using thermographic imagery, which is another way of looking at the energy of our human beings. So if we consider that the universe is energy and that we are that energy embodied in this human life, then that helps us to start to warm up to what Michael Singer is going to be sharing with us. You can feel that energy inside. And of all of the chakras and all of the different energy centers that exist within the body, that the wisdom traditions and that science talks to us about, the one that we are most focused on in the West is our head. True? What are we thinking? We're all about that. But what the ancient wisdoms talk to us about is the heart. And what Michael Singer talks about in Untethered Soul is focusing on that one energy center. Proverbs 4:23 says, "Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life." And from the east, Mingtong Gu, "Open your heart, ignite the flame in your being, and awake the natural flow of life energy in your heart. When your heart opens, the world around you changes." Like I said, we're a very brain-oriented culture, but we're learning and remembering the central importance of the heart. The heart sends exponentially more signals to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. Did you know that? It's pretty interesting. It's important to note that Earth itself and all living systems on Earth radiate electromagnetic fields that can be detected with highly sensitive scientific instruments. For example, the human heart and brain each emit their own magnetic fields, though the heart's field is much more powerful than the brain's, estimated to be 100 times more powerful. And that's according to HeartMath. The HeartMath Institute was founded nearly 30 years ago and has contributed substantially to the over 40 years of extensive research on the heart's effect on brain function. And demonstrates sustaining positive emotions not only benefits the entire physical body, but also profoundly affects how we perceive, think, feel, and perform. So what's going on in our heart, the electromagnetic center, the energy center of our heart, has a profound effect on everything we experience through the day and how others experience us. It's a two-way street. Thoughts can affect emotions and the heart as well. And the HeartMath Institute teaches that we can learn to self-activate and eventually sustain a positive emotion, and by doing so, improve our health and our overall life experience. So that their work is in many major medical institutions and educational institutions, helping people tune into what's called heart resonance and coherence, so that they measure the heart rhythms, and you can change how how the electromagnetic field of your heart is operating with your intention, with your spiritual heart. And that this affects your brain waves as well. So it can be used to reduce stress. That's the major push of it, to bring us into a more peaceful place. As I thought about what I wanted to share in this talk, like why would we keep our hearts open? Why is this important to us in the unity community or the spiritual community as a whole? And since John and I have been coming to Unity, I've noted that virtually every Unity service, no matter where we go, if we visit other communities, ends with "Let there be peace on earth," the peace song, right? So we hold hands and we sing that. And I think that's kind of why we're here. I think that that's a core belief of Unity, that if we work together, if we work toward peace on earth, and if we let it begin with me, that we can achieve that. But so, does this work? And if it does, then how? And as I looked at Michael Singer's ideas, the more that came together for me. So is there a resonance of energy? Can you feel someone else's energy? And can they feel yours? Can you feel somebody else's energy? Okay, can they feel yours? Yeah. I'm going to have you close your eyes for just a second. Open your eyes. Did you feel something different when you looked at her face? This might be a good time to mention, how many of you are familiar with the Enneagram? I see quite a few familiar faces. Yay! I am an Enneagram 6. So I'm giving myself lots of kudos for even standing on this stage talking to you, sharing these ideas with you. Feels like a major triumph to do it. So, because this is where my psyche tends to live. And I've come to understand that when that's what's on my face, it affects other people around me. Close your eyes again. And open them. What happened to your heart? Could you feel that? Yeah, you said it closed up. Yeah. We are tuned in. We're social animals. We're communal animals. We're tuned into each other energetically. And how we're doing at a heart level really matters. Close your eyes again. Okay. I love this picture. So that first picture resonated with me as a 6, that, the go-to is the fear. The second one, for my friends who are 4s, just the raw emotion, the being in it, like you are feeling all the feels all the time, and it's so intense, and it can feel so sad, and just having compassion for each other in that way. And then this one reminds me of my friends who are 9s. Aw, he's even got the peace sign going. You guys are about feeling that positive energy and helping the rest of us get to a place of peace. One more. Close your eyes, close your eyes. And I included another, really happy face. This one reminds me of my friends who are 7s. So, we're out there with the energy. But as I looked at these children's faces, it brought it home to me viscerally how we're doing inside, where we're at emotionally, spiritually, mentally, affects all the people around us. And that's how we do this thing of let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. That's where our center of power is. That's where we have the point of choice in what we're doing. So scientifically, the research by the HeartMath Institute has shown the magnetic field signals generated by an individual's heart actually have the ability to affect the people around that individual. So at a scientific measurable level. So we're feeling it, they can measure it. In one experience using traditional EEG and ECG, brain and heart monitoring equipment, scientists detected synchronization between a mother's brain waves and her baby's heartbeats when the mother focused attention on her baby. This synchronization occurred even though the two were not in physical contact. We are energetic beings and affect one another all the time. When someone is open to you, you can feel it. I ran across a snippet from a journal entry a while back, and I said, I know what they say about one's inner state affecting those around us is true, because I can feel it when John keeps his heart open to me in times of stress. When his heart is flowing, mine can too. I note that surrender to the moment isn't passive, it's just not reactive. And I wish that I could put something on the screen or say something to you that would let you feel that, because we've been married for over 15 years, and you can build up a lot of patterns, you can build up a lot of stuck energy and ways of, I know what you're going to say next, and you close down, and it's, And as we started working with these principles and really bringing it into our meditation practice and really intentionally changing how we approach situations, it's visceral. I can feel it when he is really open-hearted, when he has set aside those other expectations or patterns. And then I can move in and meet that much more easily. We are definitely not perfect at this. This is a practice. for all of us human beings for as long as we live. But it's powerful. And from my experience, it does work. Okay, so what does it feel like to close? Patty, you brought your fist to there. If everybody would take their hands and tighten them up real tight. And then let them go. You feel the difference in that. And that same thing happens with our hearts, and it can happen with our thoughts as well. You can feel the astonishing amount of energy that's available to you. Michael Singer talks about it as just being an overwhelming flow that's available that can take, in his words, can take you as high as you want to get. So Michael Singer talks about that energy as being overwhelmingly available and positive. So you think about the most high experiences you've had in your life, whether being in love, holding a newborn baby, gosh, are any of you surfers? That's pretty amazing. So you think about those. He posits that you can have that level of energy all the time, every day, simply by not closing to it. So as a person who's been worrying and tended toward depression her entire life, I had to kind of like warm up to this idea, because my energy set, where I'm comfortable with energy being, is not that high. I don't want to be up that high all the time. But as I tried on that idea cognitively, I get it. I get what he's talking about. As I prepared for this talk, believe me, lots of thoughts were coming in trying to take control of my emotions and hijack this process. And I was able to keep releasing those, keep using the practices that we're going to be talking about, stay pretty centered, and feel a higher level of energy. Remember, why is it I want to do this? Well, I have ideas that I want to share with you. There's a lot of really good things that we're getting out of this. So the heart closes because it gets blocked by old, unfinished energy patterns of the past. As human beings, we're fairly vulnerable on this planet. There are a lot of things that can damage us. And in early times, early humans, there were, and for modern humans in many communities now, there are very present physical dangers. Primarily what we experience in this culture at this time are psychological dangers. So it's the same kind of stress, same energies that we're wanting to avoid and get away from, and that we defend against. So our psychologies have developed several go-tos that help us with that. When something uncomfortable happens for us, we might engage repression or suppression or projection. Projection is kind of the go-to for the Enneagram 6. It means that if I'm uncomfortable and I've got something going on in my mind that I think, well, maybe I'm not okay, or, oh, I did that wrong, I'm very likely to think maybe my sister's thinking that, or my husband's thinking that. Like, I'll just project that over there. That's not me that's thinking that. That's coming at me. So that's a psychological defense. Suppression is conscious and repression is unconscious, and they're both very similar in that they just take things underground. So like, we're not going to deal with this. So the Enneagram 1 would tend towards suppression, like if they notice something's not amiss, tap that down right now, because that's not acceptable. The same with the repression is a subconscious process. So unfortunately, we may, even as we become more and more skilled at these things, we may experience some repression. We may still have things go underground that then emerge later. But for the conscious things, for projection or for suppression, if we notice those patterns happening, we can interrupt them, we can deal with them. The emotional go-tos for the Enneagram types, according to our centers of intelligence, and ways that we can notice if we're starting to close, is if we're experiencing anger, shame, or fear, or any of the varieties around that. So for the head types, the 5, 6, 7, that's fear. For the body types, the 8, 9s, 1s, then that's anger. And for the 2, 3, 4s, it's shame. So if you notice those emotions or any flavor of those emotions coming up in you, that's closing. That's a closing. Closing is a habit. you can train yourself to respond differently when things trigger you. If you get into an argument, if there's a traffic jam, getting cut off in traffic is a common example that's used, because I think we can all relate to it, that there's that little bit of like, that shouldn't have happened. We have a judgment with that unless we're really practiced in our thinking around it, or unless we're so good at positive thinking, if we're in the positive thinking triad, that we are just automatically thinking, oh, they probably needed to get somewhere important on time. But I found myself having a closing around a couple of things at our house. We have a huge pine tree in the back that the elderly woman who lived at the house back in the 70s said was planted when her little boy, as a Christmas tree for her little boy. So it's huge, it's amazing. And we had barred owls that nested in that tree, which was pretty fantastic. And I have an affinity for owls, and our daughter, that's her totem animal. And so it's really close to my heart, and we could hear them singing. And last year, crows moved into the neighborhood. And the crows decided that the owl shouldn't live there, and they trapped the owl in another tree and harassed her until she flew away, and then they went and savaged the nest, and it was a thing to behold. And then, interestingly, the next night there was a storm, and a limb came down that would have taken the nest down anyway, so it's like, oh, okay, I'm judging all over the crows, but nature happens and all. And the owls have not come back to nest this year. We heard them a couple times, but that tree now belongs to the crows. And I've had a hard time with that. Like, I'm kind of closed around these crows. And then I was questioning my thinking and saying, what's up? Why do I think that this bird of prey is better than this bird of prey? And do I want to continue feeling uncomfortable every time I see crows flying in and out of that tree? Because if I take a step back and look at it objectively, if I use my powers of awareness and observation for what's going on inside of me, that's all about judgment that actually has very little or nothing to do with who these creatures are. So I have a choice. I could stay all tight and judgy and like, those crows are bad and they shouldn't be here, and I wish that there were owls in our house again. And I could stay in that place, and that changes my energy. Or as I was sitting on our screen porch yesterday going through some notes, I thought, those crows actually, as they fly in and out of that tree, are very beautiful. Aesthetically, they're gorgeous birds. And if I tell myself a different story around this, I feel differently. I can feel my heart change a little bit. So I'm trying to do that with traffic jams and with people cutting me off in traffic. I'm nowhere near the hothead I was when John met me 15 years ago, so that's a good thing. And as I move through my day, I look for opportunities to see what's going on. If I can feel myself closing up, there's probably a story there. So what's closing like? It's about the past. It's about the future. It's about judgments in the present. It's about grasping to keep something that is positive. Like, I didn't want those owls to leave, right? I wanted there to always be owls in that tree. And that's a closing. Even though I'm appreciating and valuing the owls, it's still a closing. Avoiding, defending, those are all closing. What closes us? Fear, judgment, anger, shame, old stories bubbling up. Michael Singer calls that samskara. A samskara is a cycle of stored past energy patterns in a state of relative equilibrium. It is your resistance to experiencing these patterns that causes the energy to keep cycling around itself. And that all of the samskaras are stored in the spiritual heart center. So when a samskara is stimulated, it opens like a flower and begins to release stored energy. So as we move through our days and through our years, we have accumulated lots and lots of these little stored up energy patterns. And we keep them locked in our spiritual heart. And they're there, taken up just energetic room for us, and when something happens that triggers them, they come up. And they open like a flower and begin to release that energy. And they're not a bad thing. They could even be a good thing. You might feel good about something if you get triggered in a way. But often you might have flashbacks, strong sensory recollections. Things might come up with that energy releasing into the moment. So Michael Singer says, the alternative is to enjoy life instead of clinging to it or pushing it away. If you can live like that, each moment will change you. If you're willing to experience the gift of life instead of fighting with it, you will be moved to the depth of your being. When you reach this state, you will begin to see the secrets of the heart. The heart is the place through which energy flows to sustain you. This energy inspires you and raises you. It is the strength that carries you through life. It is the beautiful experience of love that pours through your whole being. Be happy, which has been stored down there for all this time, has the opportunity to make it through you. Just open, relax your heart, forgive, laugh, or do anything you want. Just don't push it back down. Of course, it hurts when it comes up. It was stored with pain. It's going to release with pain. You have to decide if you want to continue to walk around with stored pain blocking your heart and limiting your life. The alternative is to be willing to let it go when it gets stimulated. It only hurts for a minute, and then it's over. Then from the Buddhist tradition, Jack Kornfield says, what we find as we listen to the songs of our rage or fear, loneliness or longing, is that they do not stay forever. Rage turns into sorrow, sorrow turns into tears. Tears may fall for a long time, but then the sun comes out. A memory of old loss sings to us. Our body shakes and relives the moment of loss. Then the armoring around that loss gradually softens. And in the midst of the song of tremendous grieving, the pain of that loss finally finds release. Michael Singer says that the things that come up don't need processing, just release. We don't have to tell ourselves any stories about what we're experiencing. Just notice it and release it. And John and I have noticed that in the power of the day-to-day. We'll hit something that feels wrong, and if we're able to just let our minds relax around it and let it go and not tell the story or say, oop, that's a story, and just set that aside, we can move on with our days and have a good day. Whereas we may have hit up against something that would have kept us for, at least half the day, if not 2 or 3 days. But we can let that go if we don't engage that energy. Now, I want to give a caveat here. As a person who has, as many of us have, experienced things in my life that caused me to shut down, that were traumatic, that were really painful, it's important to get every bit as much help and support as we need to release things. So sometimes it's as simple as, I'm not going there, I'm not getting into that story, and other times it says I have, going to a therapist, going to self-help groups, doing 12-step, doing whatever is needed to provide myself the internal support to allow that energy to release without ripping me up or without making me feel ill-equipped for my life as I keep moving forward. So I agree with Michael Singer in that what we need to do is release it, and that there is no intrinsic value in examining the old things unless that's what's needed to help you release it. And the feeling of community, that doing this with others, of being held energetically and not all on your own, is super important as well. So whether that's with a support group or your spiritual community or your family or a best friend or whomever, for me, dogs have been a nice little energetic companion in healing and in moving through life. So it's a real deal. So Michael Singer says, just as everything happens outside in the physical world requires energy, that happens. Everything that happens inside requires an expenditure of energy. The amount of energy to keep all of that locked down and closed is astonishing. So as you release the things that have been stored from the past, as you say no to storing more from today, because why not just let it go right now? want to just accept what it is and move it on out, then you experience that energy that he's talking about. Now, I'm probably not going to let mine get sky high all the time, surfing the waves and everything, because I'm a little cautious. But being able to prepare for this talk without distress, honestly. Like, I had a couple moments where I felt nervous and my heart went fast, but without the kind of anguish and mental torment that I would have put myself through even a few months ago, is astonishing and worthy of note. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to share these ideas with you. So what happens when people open their hearts? They get better. They feel better. And the people around them feel it too. And it seeds out, actually, scientifically, into our human communities. Opening is a present thing. It's not a past thing, it's not a future thing, it's a right now thing. And you can feel it. You can feel whether you're open or not. So it's imagining that you're breathing through your heart and then bringing to mind a time when you felt a great positive emotion, compassion, or just peacefulness. So whether that's holding a sleeping child or a sleeping puppy, or just being with your beloved, or leaning against a tree, whatever that is for you that brings up that emotion, and then breathing through your heart. And doing that for even 3 minutes will change the electromagnetic resonance of your heart in a positive way. So does opening always feel good? Ultimately, yes. In the moment, you may be experiencing letting yourself be open to something that's uncomfortable. And so then, no, but it feels better than if you pushed that down, if you made a samskara out of that and then had to deal with it over and over and over. Every time something similar happens, that doesn't feel so good. Father Richard Rohr in The Universal Christ points out various challenges to keeping our heart open. He cites brain studies which show our human brains have developed with a marked capacity to focus on problems and gloss over positive vision. And so, he recommends that we really focus on those positive emotions and keep bringing them forward, that we focus on a positive take on whatever experiences we're having, not to be rosy glasses and to avoid problems, but to allow ourselves to be open to the energy. So how do we choose to stay open? Through a practice. Bottomless wonders spring from simple rules, repeated without end. That's from Benoit Mandelbrot. He did I'm blanking on the word, the fractals. The fractals. You guys familiar with fractals? A mathematic equation that produces, look it up if you haven't seen it, that produces just astonishingly complex repeating patterns. So that's what you bring to the practice of opening your heart. Bottomless wonders spring from simple rules repeated without end. So transcending the tendency to close, we remember that it's natural and normal to want to protect ourselves, our body, heart, and mind. And we recognize the difference between allowing and experiencing and releasing versus the psychological defense mechanisms that we talked about earlier of repression, suppression, and projection. They feel differently. We might examine our thoughts and reactions for more information, for patterns, for clarity. I might say, oh, yeah, there I am, closing down around those crows again. Do I want to keep doing that? Cultivating an awareness of our inner observer, of stillness. Interrupting the pattern of closing. Sometimes I just have to take a walk. Like nothing else is going to fix it. I can't make my heart slow down. I can't make my angry thoughts stop. But if I will take myself out and walk, move that part of my energetic being, that can help. I have friends who paint. They go and paint when that's what they need, a creative expression. There's a difference between being a doormat and being open to, and there's a difference between being open and being indifferent as well. So openness allows us to know where our boundaries are and be clear in ourselves about those. And openness allows us to take right action where we see injustice from a centered place versus reacting, and versus coming from those samskaras that we have that are about old things. They're not even about the present thing. So taking appropriate action and communicating can help. Those of you who are familiar with Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, that's a tool that we use regularly. John and I also use the Hawaiian practice of forgiveness and healing called Ho'oponopono. The Buddhist practice of metta is one that I use regularly. It helps bring my heart to openness on a regular basis. And then this has been an excellent tool for the head types. This has been like a lifesaver for me. I don't know if it would resonate for the other types or not, but try it on. So Byron Katie offers something called the work. And anytime I'm stuck on something, like crows are bad and shouldn't be here, I could go through these questions. Is it true? Can I absolutely know that it's true? How do I react? What happens when I believe that thought? And who would I be if I didn't have that thought? And what I found on my screen porch yesterday, that I would be a pretty relaxed, peaceful woman enjoying that big, gorgeous black bird swoop in and out of the pine tree, instead of being, well, I described that earlier, and we can let that go. And then you can turn that around, and I would say, the crows should be here, and give specific examples of what I mean by that, what's true there. When looking at opening, we can, and resistance, we can begin with something as simple as the weather. So it's pretty neutral, right? So if you have a reaction, an emotional reaction to the weather, I guarantee you that your emotional reaction, although the electromagnetic field of your heart is powerful, probably is not going to change the weather for that day in any measurable way, right? So essentially, we might as well say that's beyond our power, okay? So then, can we open ourselves to whatever the weather is? Can we let go of whatever our judgments are that are closing us up and making us cranky around that and ruining our day maybe, and just flow into it and feel our open energy related to the weather. So a pretty neutral thing to start with. There's a quote from, it's kind of long, but it's from Jack Cordfield, who's a teacher that I respect greatly, from Healing the Heart. Just as we open and heal the body by sensing its rhythms and touching it with a deep and kind attention, so we can open and heal other dimensions of our being. The heart and the feelings go through a similar process of healing through the offering of our attention to their rhythms, nature, and needs. Most often, opening the heart begins by opening to a lifetime's accumulation of unacknowledged sorrow, both our personal sorrows and the universal sorrows. At times, we may experience this sorrow physically as contractions and barriers around our hearts, but more often we feel the depth of our wounds, our abandonment, our pain, as unshed tears. The Buddhists describe this as an ocean of human tears larger than the four great oceans. As we take the one seat and develop a meditative attention, the heart presents itself naturally for healing. The grief we have carried for so long from pains and dashed expectations and hopes arises. We grieve for our past traumas and present fears, and for all of the feelings we never dared experience consciously. Whatever shame or unworthiness we have within us arises. Jack Engler, a Buddhist teacher and psychologist at Harvard University, has described meditation practice as primarily a practice of grieving and of letting go. At most of the spiritual retreats I've been part of, nearly half the students are working with some level of grief, denial, anger, loss, or sorrow. Out of this grief work comes a deep renewal. And I mention this because, and Victor has joined us up in the loft there, and I'm so pleased because when John and I first started coming to the temple, it was probably in the early 2000s, maybe 2005 or so, and that was my first time engaging in a meditative practice, and it very quickly brought up a lot of things I was not prepared to deal with, and I didn't have a groundwork for knowing what to do with that, and I was like, I'm out. And it took a long time for me to move back into supporting myself through that and making sure that as things arise, which they will, that I had the ways that I needed, the supports that I needed internally and externally to just deal with them and to be able to get to a more free place. And if I had it to do over again with my younger self, I would say, oh, just push through, just get that right now and don't spend those next years kind of locked and tight, start opening now. So this is why I mention it. That's normal if that happens. If you start meditating every day, we're doing 2, sometimes 3 20-minute sits a day now. And I have to be aware that things are going to come up. But as we've done this over the last months, and for John over a year now, the freedom inside, the emotional freedom, is phenomenal. The ability to show up and inhabit my life is strikingly different. So when those things come up, because they will, they're stored here, right? Find a way to support yourself. Reach out. There are so many of us who would be willing to be supports in that process as well. Nothing ever is worth closing your heart over. When you feel pain, Michael Singer says, simply view it as energy. Just start seeing these inner experiences as energy passing through your heart and before the eye of your consciousness. Then relax. Do the opposite of contracting and closing. Relax and release. Relax your heart until you are actually face to face with the exact place where it hurts. Stay open and receptive so you can be present right where the tension is. You must be willing to be present right at the place of the tightness and pain, and then relax and go even deeper. This is very deep growth and transmutation, but you will not want to do this. You will feel tremendous resistance to doing this, and that's what makes it so powerful. As you relax and feel the resistance, the heart will want to pull away, to close, to protect, and to defend itself. Keep relaxing. Relax your shoulders and relax your heart. Let go and give room for the pain to pass through you. It's just energy. Just see it as energy and let it go. The more you stay open, the more energy flow can build. At some point, so much energy comes into you that it starts flowing out of you. You feel it as waves pouring off you. You can actually feel it flowing off your hands, out your heart, and through other energy centers. All these energy centers open, and a tremendous amount of energy starts flowing out of you. What is more, the energy affects other people. People can pick up on your energy, and you're feeding them with this flow. If you're willing to open even more, it never stops. You become a source of light for all those around you.